What if some of the biggest retirement decisions you'll ever make don't feel like decisions at all? They don't come with deadlines, they don't force action, and most people don't even realize the rules have changed when they happen. That's why in this video, we'll walk through 3 ages where retirement planning quietly shifts, ages 59, 62, and 65, and why those moments matter long before retirement feels real. Let's get right into it. Age 59, the first silent default appears. Age 59 and a half is one of the most overlooked moments in retirement planning, not because it's dramatic, but because it's quiet. At this age, a key rule changes. Money inside most retirement accounts can now be accessed without the 10% early withdrawal penalty. What's important here, though, isn't the rule itself, it's what doesn't happen when the rule changes. There's no notification, no decision deadline, no reason to stop and reassess what your plan is doing. So, most people don't. They keep doing exactly what they were doing before, contributing, investing, not touching the accounts, because that behavior has been reinforced for decades as responsible. And to be clear, that behavior is responsible in the accumulation phase, but at 59 and a half, something subtle shifts. For the first time, flexibility enters the picture. Not an obligation to act, but the option to. And when that option goes unused, a silent default is set. And that default becomes continue as if nothing changed. That choice doesn't feel like a decision, but in reality, a new planning phase has begun, whether you've acknowledged it or not. This is the first moment where retirement planning stops being about growing a number and starts being about how that number might eventually need to be used. Most people don't recognize that transition when it happens, and because nothing forces an action at age 59, the consequences of that inaction don't show up right away. They'll show up later when the next decision does feel unavoidable. Age 62, when silent defaults become directional. At age 62, retirement planning changes again, but this time it doesn't stay quiet. This is the first point where Social Security becomes available. And unlike age 59, this change feels like a decision. You're presented with a choice. You can start taking your benefits now, or you can delay. On the surface, it looks pretty straightforward. Claiming earlier provides income sooner. Waiting increases the benefit later, right? And because this decision finally puts a number on the table, many people assume that they're now doing retirement planning. This is where silent defaults start to take on direction. Some people claim at 62 simply because the benefit is available to them. Feels logical to turn on an income stream once it's offered, right? Especially if retirement is close or work starts to become less appealing. Others delay because they've heard that waiting is better, without fully understanding what that delay requires in the meantime. In both cases, the decision is often made without really testing how it fits into the rest of your retirement plan. What changes at 62 isn't just that income becomes available, it's that pressure starts to move. Claiming earlier can reduce pressure on a retirement portfolio in those early years of retirement, but it also locks in a lower guaranteed income base that portfolio may need to support later. Delaying does the opposite. It strengthens future guaranteed income, but it increases reliance on the portfolio in those years between retirement and when those benefits begin. Neither path is inherently wrong here. The issue is that without a framework to reference, this decision is rarely coordinated with everything else that is happening: taxes, withdrawals, and other timing of other income sources. And because Social Security feels like a standalone choice, many people make it as if it is one. This is the moment where default choices stop being invisible and start steering the plan, often without the person realizing where they're being directed to. And that full impact of that direction doesn't become clear until the next major shift arrives. So 62 is really the true fork in the road. And at 65, everything shifts again because a third system enters the picture and starts interacting with the other two. Age 65, when silent defaults start interacting. By the time age 65 arrives, retirement planning stops feeling theoretical. This is when Medicare begins, and for many people, that brings a sense of relief. Healthcare coverage feels more stable, and premiums are no longer tied to an employer or the open market. But this is also the point where retirement planning becomes more cohesive. Medicare doesn't exist on its own. The costs of Medicare are influenced by your income. And income at this stage is rarely coming from just one place, right? Withdrawals from certain retirement accounts increase taxable income. Taxable income influences Medicare premiums, and Social Security benefits can also become taxable depending on how your income withdrawals are structured. Individually, each of these rules is manageable, but what changes at age 65 is that these begin interacting. Decisions that once felt separate, when to claim Social Security, how much to withdraw from your investment accounts, which type of accounts to withdraw from, they now affect one another. And by this point, many of those decisions or non-decisions are already in motion. This is where silent defaults start to reveal themselves. That claiming decision made at age 62 influences how much guaranteed income is available. The withdrawal patterns established earlier influence your taxable income. And together, they determine not just cash flow, but healthcare costs and flexibility going forward. And none of this means that something has gone wrong, but it does mean that retirement has crossed a threshold. What once felt like a collection of individual choices is now a coordinated system, whether it was designed that way or not, right? Once a system is in place, small changes in one area can have unintended consequences elsewhere. That realization is often what causes people to look back and wonder, when did this thing become so complicated? The answer is not usually from a single moment, but the result of that series of quiet defaults or non-actions that are finally interacting in plain sight. Why smart people miss these moments. By this point, it's easy to look back and think, well, I should have seen this coming. But that reaction misunderstands how retirement planning actually unfolds for most people. The reason these moments are missed isn't ignorance, it isn't procrastination, and it certainly isn't a lack of discipline. It's because of habits. For decades, the correct behavior is simple and consistent, right? Save more, don't touch your retirement accounts, and stay invested. And those habits are reinforced year after year by employers, advisors, and common sense. And then the rules change, but the habits don't change with them. At 59, nothing is forcing you to have a new conversation. At 62, Social Security feels like a standalone decision. And at 65, Medicare arrives with rules that weren't part of your original plan. Each shift happens quietly, and each one builds on behavior that previously felt correct. And this is why silent defaults are so powerful. They don't feel like choices. They feel like staying disciplined, like not doing anything wrong, like waiting until something becomes clear enough to take or demand action. For many people, retirement planning remains on autopilot simply because nothing interrupts it. And when that path finally becomes visible, when income, taxes, and healthcare start interacting, it can feel as though this complexity all appeared at once. But in reality, it slowly built up over time. Now, understanding this isn't about regret, it's about clarity. Because once you recognize how these defaults formed, you can stop judging past decisions and start thinking more intentionally about what comes next. And that's where planning actually begins. And if any of this sounds familiar and you're wondering how these silent defaults might be showing up in your plan, we do offer a personalized retirement analysis video. It's simply a way to look at your income, taxes, and timing decisions together without pressure, so you can see what's happening by default and what's actually within your control. If that would be helpful for you, click on the link below and fill out the questionnaire. Now, let's talk about how to replace defaults with a clear way of thinking. By the time most people reach age 62, retirement planning feels more serious, not because the rules got harder, but because the consequences start to feel more permanent. This is where silent defaults tend to do the most damage. Some people claim Social Security immediately without ever testing how that decision affects their total income picture. The benefit turns on, income shows up, and it feels like progress. But the long-term role that benefit plays in supporting taxes and future flexibility often goes unexamined. Others delay those benefits because they've heard that waiting is better without a clear plan for how income will be generated in those years in between. Withdrawals increase from your portfolio, and your portfolios work harder earlier, and risk quietly concentrates where it's least forgiving. That's called sequence of returns risk. And both paths can work, but both paths can also create unnecessary strain. The difference isn't timing, It's coordination. And this is where planning needs a framework, not a rule of thumb. The way we think about this is by starting with your portfolio income needs, or your PIN. Instead of asking, when should I claim Social Security? The better question is, how much income does my portfolio need to reliably provide once all other income sources are accounted for? To answer that, you begin with what life actually costs in retirement. Not guesses, not averages. Add up your annual spending, including essential expenses like mortgage or housing upkeep costs, utilities, groceries, healthcare costs, along with your lifestyle expenses, right? Date nights, club memberships, the things that make retirement worth being in retirement for, and then any added flexibility you might want later on in life. From there, you want to subtract your predictable income sources like Social Security or a pension. What remains is the job that your portfolio needs to do. That number becomes your anchor. Once you understand your PIN, decisions at age 62 stop being so isolated. Claiming earlier lowers guaranteed income and increases your portfolio's responsibility later. Delaying strengthens future guaranteed income, but increases that portfolio's responsibility during those gap years. Taxes add another layer into that decision-making process. Again, different withdrawal strategies affect taxable income differently, and that can influence how much of Social Security is taxed, what tax brackets you will be in, and eventually how Medicare premiums are calculated. This is why those years between 62 and 65 matter so much. They act as a bridge, a period where income decisions, withdrawal strategies, and tax planning can be coordinated before retirement becomes more rigid. When these pieces are coordinated, your decisions are made intentionally. When they aren't, those defaults take over. And this is the shift most people never experience on their own, moving from reacting to rules to designing around desired incomes. That's what turns retirement planning from a series of decisions into a cohesive system. When coordination replaces timing. When you step back and you look at ages 59, 62, and 65 together, a clear pattern emerges. None of these ages matter because they're special on the calendar, right? They matter because each one quietly changes the rules and introduces new defaults that shape what comes next. At 59, flexibility appears, but it doesn't demand action. At 62, income decisions begin to steering the plan. And at age 65, those decisions start interacting inside of that system. The problem isn't missing a moment. The problem is letting those moments continue to operate independently without thinking about consequences. Retirement planning works best when these ages are treated as reference points and not deadlines. They're not checkpoints that you either hit or miss, but they are signals that your planning environment has changed. And even when earlier opportunities weren't fully used, addressing your situation now can still potentially improve your future. Choices can be redesigned, decisions can be placed intentionally, and plans can adapt to real life, not just ideal timing. And this is why successful retirement planning isn't about making perfect decisions at perfect ages. It's about understanding how decisions connect and building a plan that reflects your priorities, your risks, and your reality. When coordination replaces timing, retirement stops feeling like a series of irreversible choices and starts feeling like a system that you can actually manage. If there's one takeaway from this, it's that retirement outcomes are rarely shaped by a single decision. They're shaped by a series of quiet moments, times when rules change, flexibility appears or is removed, and new options enter the picture. And nothing forces you to stop and rethink what your plan is doing. That's how these silent defaults form. And ages 59, 62, and 65 aren't deadlines to beat or milestones you need to hit or miss. They're just signals that the planning environment has shifted and that coordination matters more than timing. The good news is that these defaults aren't permanent, right? With the right framework, you can re-examine everything, make adjustments, and redesign a plan to fit your life, not just someone else's rules or assumptions. If you want help understanding how these moments apply to your situation, click on the link below and receive a personalized retirement analysis video where we will walk through how your income taxes and timing decisions could work together and where silent defaults may already be shaping up your plan. Until next time, take care.